Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Slowpreneur. I'm Stephanie Pellet, and I am your host on this slow business journey. I am really excited that you're here today because I have a really awesome interview coming your way. I was lucky enough to speak with Celina Rosso, who is a business coach and calls herself an intuitive business witch, which is a title that I am 100% obsessed with. You may not know this about me, but I definitely have a witchy side, and I loved talking to Celina about how we can bring more witchiness, woo woo, and energetics into the process of running our business. We talked about so many cool concepts in this interview, including how we can build a relationship with our business that is based on trust, how we can keep showing up even when we're not hearing much back, and we can follow the intuitive nudges that our business and our guides are sending us. We also talked about this really amazing concept of meeting every strategic choice in our business with energy. So, meeting strategy with energy, which is something that I think is so profound and is going to make a huge difference for me and hopefully for your business as well. We also talked about how it is so important to bring more life into your life outside of your business in order to bring more inspiration and creativity into your work. And we talked about how creatives need structure. And hopefully, by the end of this interview, we're going to convince you to add a little bit more structure if it's something that you resist. Honestly, this whole hour is full of interesting ideas. So I encourage you to grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Celina Rosso because it was such a treat. Let's dive in. Hi, Celina. Welcome to Slowpreneur.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I am really excited to talk to you because your title on Instagram is Intuitive Business Witch,
Yeah.
which as soon as I saw it, I just thought, yeah, yes,
hmm
correct. We need to connect. We need to talk because Intuitive Business Witch is kind of like all of my favorite things all in one place. I love business. I love
hmm
intuition. I love being witchy, but I get the sense you're a bit witchier than I am. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, listen, thank you for noticing that. As an entrepreneur, we get to kind of make up our own titles. I feel like all of us are
Mhm.
like, I don't know, what words feel good today. And so owning the word witch was a very fun one for me. So I'm glad it spoke to you too.
Yeah. So talk to us about how you got from where you were to Intuitive Business Witch, because I'm guessing you did not, wake up
No.
as a 1 year old as an Intuitive Business Witch. So what was your path like to getting here?
Yeah, no, there definitely wasn't an intuitive business witch booth at Career Day that I was familiar with. I might have
No?
missed it. No, it was really
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, very limited at my high school. But my first career, if you will, was in child and youth care. And that's what I went to university for. And I was like, this is it. This is going to be my whole career. I was dead set on it until I really got into the work.
Mm.
And anyone who's in social services will know that it's extremely draining and the support is limited and there's so much to go through. You don't even have the space for your own experience within it all, and so everything is enmeshed, and it just got too much. The last job that I had done in the field was in foster care, and that was particularly challenging. I didn't really think about it. I was like, I don't know, this looks like a fun sector, until I walked in and everyone was burnt out, and I was like, oh, I was naive. I was like, I'll be the one
Right.
that's not burnt out. Like, I can definitely, self-care my way through this. And spoiler alert, I was not the exception. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a gentle break from doing this work. I'll come back to it. And at the time, I was really into fitness, and so I decided to pursue personal training. I worked for one of those big box gyms,
Mm.
which was an interesting experience to say the least. But I loved fitness, and I figured there was another way to do it. And I had a friend who owned a gym, worked for them for a bit. It wasn't really the right fit. But a friend of mine that I'd met at the gym was opening up her own studio space with her husband, and it was for trainers who were self employed. And so
Mm.
I was like, okay, sure. So overnight, I just got a business license, transferred my clients over, and that's how I started my business. I was not a kid with a lemonade stand who dreamed of being an entrepreneur. It was just like a series of what is the right next step that makes sense right now. And even then, I was like, oh, and then my backup plan would be to go back. I'm going to be a child and youth worker again. And it just
Mm-hmm.
over time got less and less appealing the more that I enjoyed the process of running my own business. Um, I went from fitness to the more complex nature of food and body relationships. Got an
Mhm.
additional certification in that, and that's what I did for a while. The next right step ended up being that I wanted to expand my social media, and I was able to grow significantly at the time, and was like featured in these articles about my content, which was quite interesting.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh, okay, like I can help people do this because people were asking. So I started working in social media work, which then expanded into helping people holistically with their businesses. And then had myself a quaint little spiritual awakening where I realized that I could connect to spirits. It was a surprise to me. And through there, it became one of those things where I'm just going to call this woo woo. And like, that's fine. It'll be like a weird thing that I know how to do on the side until my spirit guides got clearer and louder and were very clear with me that they're like, okay, you can dance around this subject if you want, but we're going to need you to step it up. And so
Mm.
slowly it became more of a focal point in my business alongside how I help entrepreneurs. And so now I help entrepreneurs, creatives, and people who don't have businesses access their intuitive gifts, which is interesting because it's like I did 18 different things. But what I find most fascinating is at the root of it, it's always been about connecting people back to themselves. And this
Mhm.
is just another way that I do that. Yeah.
Mm. So cool. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where they all feel different, but then as you
Mhm.
said, there's these threads running through everything that you've done. And one
Yeah.
of the things that I love about that story that you just told is the way that you kind of surprised yourself a
Mhm.
little bit along the way, or just kind of followed the little hits that
Yeah.
were coming to you, the little messages that were coming to you. And yeah, can you talk to us about how your intuition has actively played a role in the unfolding of your business, sort
Mhm.
of leading up to this point, and then, yeah, still till this day, because I'm so fascinated about how you've moved through all of these chapters.
Yeah. I always like I work with a lot of people who are also in transition in their
Mm,
work, and there seems to be a lot of it in this post-pandemic space. I feel like a lot of people are making pretty big shifts. And
yeah.
something I'll always say is like I wish I could tell a story about how I handled it with grace, but truly I went kicking and screaming with every transition. Like I like to tell people, like, when I was in fitness, I was like, this is it for me. I have found my thing. This is going to be me for the rest of my life. And I said that every time I made a switch. I was like, okay, I finally figured it out. And it's been
Yeah.
insanely humbling to realize that I may not know what it is, and I don't need to know what's going to happen a year from now or where it's going to take me. But I did, in fact, go down kicking and screaming. It was always like, it starts with the very subtle nudges of like, oh, there's something else that I'm interested in exploring. With fitness, I was working with clients who were struggling, and you would tell them what to eat, and I'm like, this is stupid. I know it's bigger than this. I know it's not about what they're eating. Like, I can't
Right.
entertain this idea anymore. This is boring and
Mm,
stupid, and I'm no longer in integrity or in alignment with my values if I know more and I've connected to more and I'm not offering more. And
yeah.
that's always what had shifted. So even then, when I had shifted into social media, it was the same thing. I was hearing these experiences from entrepreneurs who are like, I can't even connect with the right people. I feel so disconnected from what I'm even doing. And I'm like, and I know how to do that and I know better. And so it goes from these like subtle nudges to um, what I would consider uh, divine intervention, which is if you are like me and you are someone who goes down kicking and screaming and avoids transition, what I find, and something I often see when I read for people, is that your guides will be patient with you until they're no longer patient and start making your comfortable situation a lot less comfortable. So there would be a lot more issues, or I'd feel a lot more disconnected, or business wasn't flowing the same, all because I wouldn't make the moves, and I knew it. At that point, it was like I was very aware of what was happening. And so it kind of, kicked me in the butt until I actually made the moves. But you can know something intuitively and not feel ready yet. It's about when you're ready to align with what you know.
Mm, yeah, which is such a hard thing. I'm so happy you're being honest about the fact that it wasn't just like
No.
dancing in a field of wildflowers. Like, I'm ready for my next transition because we're never ready for the next
Mhm.
transition, and it never
Mhm.
feels like the right time, and it always feels scary. So just thank you for normalizing that. As somebody who has intuitive in your Instagram bio,
Mhm.
obviously it's inspiring to hear that even you struggle to follow your intuition. And would you say, do you
Yeah.
think you're getting a little better at it now, or do you
Yeah.
think it's still challenging?
I mean, it's well, in my experience, the transitions have gotten bigger, so they felt less
Mm,
connected. They've required more risk. They've required more vulnerability, a willingness to be seen, a willingness to be misunderstood. I mean, you can imagine one of the biggest like moments for me was realizing that I'm now in a position where people believe that my work doesn't exist. Like there are people who
mm,
don't believe in spirit work, right? Who don't believe that
mm-hmm,
energy work is
mm-hmm,
a thing. And I've never had a
mm-hmm.
career before where people could deny my own career existence. And that's weird.
Right.
And it's weird to be at a party and to tell people that you like can talk to spirits, you know? And so it required a whole new level of self acceptance. And so it's interesting. It's the intuitive knowing has gotten clearer and I've gotten better at being receptive to it. But the very real human experience of what it's going to mean for me in my personal life and my professional life to make the changes, those have gotten steeper as I've been more prepared
Mm,
for it. And so
mm,
I wouldn't say it's easier, but it is clear.
mm. Yeah, that's a cool distinction. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's like you've practiced this skill, you've built this muscle so that you're ready. It's still just as scary, but now you're readier than
Yeah.
you were before, and the transitions are
Yeah.
huge. So you
I mean,
needed to have built that muscle.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would have done if this had like if I had been doing this work, this was the transition right after fitness. There's no way. I
Right,
would have lost
right.
it. I absolutely would have gone back to my old work and been like, I'm done. Business is weird. I'm not doing this.
Mm,
So it, even when we talk about because I get a lot of questions about like manifestation and calling in your
hmm.
desires and things like that, and people are like, well, I just want to like be there already. Like what are the steps? And it's just like truly most of it is that the things that are happening in your life are preparing you to be the person who is ready to receive what you're meant to receive.
Right.
So 5 years ago, I was absolutely not ready for this. And I wouldn't have known that. And I was, out there begging for like the business of my dreams. And my spirit guides were like, hold on, we
Mm.
got like 17 more things to do before we get there, you know? So,
Before you will accept it, right?
yeah.
It's like not even before you could do it. You could probably do it, but
Yeah.
before you can actually accept that this is your path and accept that this
Hmm.
is what you're going to talk about at parties, like you're stronger now.
Yeah.
You can talk about it
Absolutely.
at parties. Yeah.
Yeah. Like so like even when we talk about like dream desires and manifestations like that whole vein of things it's or what you want to do with your business, we forget that it's like I look at everything as a relationship and you are
Mhm.
in a relationship with your business. And so you may not be in a position where you are ready to receive the level of intimacy and the level of commitment that your business has to offer you. It's often
Mm,
on your end. And it's not to be like all shamey about it, but like there's stuff to work through. I can't tell you,
mm,
like, when we talk about like self sabotage, if we're not working through that and we get what we want to get and we're not actually prepared to show up for it or don't have the tools yet to support our nervous system through that expansion, what are we doing? You know?
mhm, mhm. It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the thing and we're gonna drop it like a hot potato because
Hmm.
we're
Yeah.
just like, "I'm not ready. What is this? What is this? What is this?"
Yeah.
It reminds me, I know you talk a little bit, I saw some of your content that's about building trust,
Mm.
and this kind of reminds me, this idea of you being in a relationship with your business
Hmm.
also reminds me of this idea that you need to build trust with your business. Like,
Hmm.
business is gonna have your back, and if you take this step, you're not going to lose everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would just love for you to talk a little bit more about that idea of trust because that's something I'm really passionate about. I think so much of business is like you have to keep putting yourself out there,
Hmm.
even when you're not getting anything back and it's just cricket show every
Sure.
day, just like tweet, 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 tweet. How do we keep up that trust and that faith?
Yeah. That's a great question. I like to tell people about the silence, like especially like when we talk about like a launch and there's a lot of quiet.
Hmm.
I always remind people, I'm like, do you like comment on everything in the midst of your buying decisions? Because I don't. Like,
Yeah.
I can be like, oh my God, this is the best post I've ever read. And I might also forget to even press like. Like,
Yeah.
that's just the
Often.
nature. Yeah. And I'm like, sorry to anyone whose post I missed, but like, truly, that's how we respond. And if that's how we respond, why do we expect something different from somebody else who's in their process? And we are denying people their
Mm,
process when we assume that they should act faster or that they should be more vocal about it, because we would never demand that. You'd be like, ew, if someone demanded that of you. If someone got on their stories, they're like, I saw you looking at my post and you didn't hit purchase. We'd be like, ew, get a grip. Right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, let people have their process. And alongside that, when we're putting the power in, like, why is no one buying? We are missing the point of the silence, which is, yes, to build that trust with our business. Because even if it's not this idea, it could be the next one. And even when you allow yourself the permission to try one concept, usually opens the door to the next one. I can't tell you how many times I've
Mhm.
launched one thing and then some, like, I'll have like 5 inquiries about an entirely separate offer that I'm not even
Mm,
talking about. And it's usually showcasing, like, hey, people are interested, but this wasn't it. This wasn't how they wanted to be supported, or this didn't make sense for people right now. And so
mm,
we don't leave room for miracles or leave room for understanding our business when we assume how it should happen or how it should look in order for it to be successful, you know?
yeah. And it's that same thing of building that muscle, right? You're
Hmm.
trying something, you're
Hmm.
trusting that even if I don't get the exact result that I predicted or wanted or thought I was manifesting, there's still something to learn here.
Hmm.
There's still a new opportunity that might open up here. And
Yeah.
I have to practice putting myself in that, showing up in that, launching in that,
Hmm.
connecting with people in order to figure out what the next thing is. And that does involve trust.
Yeah.
And I think that I would be so curious to hear, kind of in your own journey, what have been the things that have helped you to maintain that trust for yourself? Because it is almost
Hmm.
like a spiritual practice, right? You're following these steps and you're
Hmm.
saying, okay, I'm going to leave fitness behind. Were there, confirmations or things that have helped you to kind of move through your path with trust?
Yeah. Great question. Trust is built through experience, and so, it's,
Mm,
I didn't always make moves trusting how it would go. The other thing about trust is that the external expression of trust is confidence. And so really, when we're looking at like showing up like confidently and what that looks like, it really becomes about trust in yourself. Like, at the end of the day, I didn't know if my business was really going to work the way that I wanted it to work, but I need to trust that at the very least that I would know how to figure it out. That if it did
mm,
fail and it did crumble, that I at least trust myself to pick myself back up and figure out a new path. Because even in the expression of business, it's not trust to assume that something will sell. That's not trust. That's an expectation, you know? And when we think about like the longevity of business, the big picture that we have for ourselves, like, it's a little silly that we assume it's like this offer is going to be the one that gets me there. Like, how do you know? Like, we're just, you know what I mean? Like, let it unfold the way that it needs to, but can you at least trust that you'll figure it out along the way? And I know that
mm,
that's hard. One thing that I used to do often is um, distinguish the difference between being both feet in and having a set backup plan for the voice in my head. uh,
mm,
because a lot of people will do the thing where they're like, well, I can always go back and I can do this, or if this doesn't fail. What I would never recommend is throughout your launch carrying the story of what you're going to do if it fails, because now we're just creating an expectation.
yeah.
However, to end the loop that goes on in your mind about the worst case scenario, finish the sentence. So if you're like, what if no one buys? Okay, well, what if no one buys? What if no one buys at the end of this? What will you do? And you have to be realistic and come up with a real plan, not like, I'll give up everything and I'll, throw in the towel. You have to put a real plan of what you'll really do and how you really
Hmm.
support yourself financially, emotionally, whatever it is for you. And then you have to let it go so that when the thoughts come up again, you're like, hey, I hear you. I know what's happening. We already took care of that. Let's focus on this for
Hmm.
now. Even
Hmm.
putting a date on it had been really helpful. So I would put like certain dates in my calendar that are like a month or two away of when I was going to reevaluate if my business was working or if I needed to consider a different plan, just
Yeah.
so I mentally had the space to be like, I already took care of that. That has a date. It's not today's problem because it's not on today's
Hmm.
calendar. And so
Hmm.
creating distance so that you can actually show up and try without feeling like I have to figure out if this is the right move or the wrong move in this moment. Create enough breathing
Hmm.
room for me to develop trust. And I think that that can be
Mhm.
really important.
Oh, that's so good. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
I give often similar advice, right? Because otherwise you're sort of anti-manifesting. Like
Mm-hmm.
you refuse to even show up and talk about it because you're already like
Yeah.
embarrassed that it didn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of like, oh, I didn't fill the group program. So I better not like talk about it
Yeah.
now because I won't fill it and then it will be embarrassing.
Yeah.
Instead of just thinking to yourself, okay, well, if I don't fill the group program, maybe I pivot it to a one-on-one offering
Mm-hmm.
instead. And who cares? Like nobody's paying as much attention to us as we think that they are,
Yeah.
So I think that that's so awesome. And it sort of ties into another concept I saw you talk about at one point in one of your posts about how you need to have at least something that you can evaluate,
Mm-hmm.
right? You were talking about this idea that if you don't put anything out there
Mm-hmm.
and you don't talk about your idea and you don't try to launch it with that trust or with that hope that it will kind of unfold the way
Mm-hmm.
that you're hoping it will, how can you even evaluate
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it was a success?
Yeah.
It's like you have nothing to go on. You're just going on your fears
Mm-hmm.
and your anxieties and your insecurities, right? Can you
Yeah.
speak more about that concept of like needing something to evaluate?
Sure. Yeah. Because yes. So I have like a not a very glamorous concept that I wish I came up with a better name 4 years ago, but I don't have one, and
Mm.
it's a really ugly name. But I used to call them the shit the bed posts, which is to make to make content that like you don't care if it like shits the bed, and it probably will. Like content that
Mm.
isn't something that would be highly validated, that you can't guarantee, you're not going to overthink. Depending on the client, I make them put timers on how long they'll spend on a piece of content too, if they're like big
Mm.
overthinkers. Oh, I love a use of a timer, by the way. That's one of my favorite
Mm.
tools. Um,
Mm.
but to create a challenge for yourself of how often you're going to create to get out of this rut of perfectionism around your content, because exactly that, like I can't evaluate a client's content if there's no content to evaluate. And you're never, unless you're going to say something extremely harmful, it's very unlikely that you're going to say something that's going to be harmful for your business. What's more harmful is not even letting yourself try, because now we have an increased barrier. Now you haven't posted in a week, and now there's like all this pressure that this one post has to be the one that gets you clients, and now we're being transactional with our content, and now it's not even fun, and now we're like, it's a miserable cycle. And I'm very passionate about people enjoying their experience inside their business and letting the creative process be creative. And one thing I like to say, because I get this comment all the time where people will say, well, I wasn't feeling inspired.
Mm.
To wait for inspiration is just like not a thing. But I think beyond that, creativity is not an emotion. And people will tell me like, oh, I need to be in a good space to be creative. And that's just simply not true. When you think about your favorite musicians and where they write their best songs from, they're usually in a really low place. Your
Mm.
creativity is not synonymous with your mood, and learning to
Right.
create at different points in your emotional and energetic experience is going to help you sustain yourself online, because then it doesn't require you to operate at 100% in order to communicate with your audience, because that's exhausting and it's inhuman and it's not going to work, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And part of it, it sounds like, is just getting into a flow or a structure, a
Mm-hmm.
habit
Yeah.
almost of showing up or putting something out there.
Mm-hmm.
I speak a lot about like my newsletter, right? I set up a format for my newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
I just fill it in every time that I have to write one. And I'm in that habit. And it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
if I feel inspired to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And that consistency, which obviously consistency is like a complicated thing. Not everyone can be the same kind of consistent, and people have different,
Yeah.
learning disabilities and various things that might prevent them from being the same amount of consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having the structure can make such a huge difference in us being able to continue showing up and not make it feel so personal and pressured and weighty all the time of that idea of transactionality,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know a lot of people who haven't sent a newsletter in a while, and then they think about sending a newsletter because they have something to sell, and it starts to feel icky for
Yeah.
them and for the other person on the other end. And so kind of getting into, well, it just reminds me of the word flow. We've been talking a lot about flow in this interview, because if you're in the creative flow, things can come to you, they can come through you, you can put
Mm-hmm.
things out and connect with more people as you
Yeah.
go. And that's something I notice in your content for sure. You're like always flowing it out.
Yes. Well, and the thing is with working with creatives, there's this like anti-structure mentality. But the thing
Mhm.
is that they end up also being the same people who really struggle with with consistency. And consistency is just like whatever frequency works for you. I always recommend a
Yeah.
baseline, meaning like, sure, it would be nice to post 5 days a week, but like, what can you do as like when you're at your lowest effort maintenance? And like, if that's twice a week, awesome, that's your consistency. But when we talk about creating flow, creatives who do not have structure are in a constant state of chaos because there's nowhere for that flow to exist within. And so
Mm.
containing your flow, and it doesn't have to be like, I work with clients that have a varying like degree of structure. I actually enjoy quite a bit. It helps me so much, and I would not be myself without it. But even if that looks like a 2 hour block where you just like have
Mm.
like a topic to work through instead of it being like hour by hour, whatever it is. But if there's nothing to contain that flow, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's what makes people feel like they have a million ideas and know where to put them. Or then like
Mhm.
their idea has to be life changing every time. Like you do not have to be life changing. And also, like, I can't help but be so annoyed when I spend like way too much time creating something and then I say something really simple, and that's obviously the one that does well. And I was like, thank you for that really humbling lesson. Thank you for reminding me, you know?
Yes, I do know. And I also think it's a good reminder too that you don't have to be revolutionary every time you share something.
No.
Absolutely not. Second of all, I think, and I say this sometimes, it's okay to be boring in
Hmm.
business. And by boring, I just mean you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. You can have certain core messages
Hmm.
that you riff on in different ways. You can have certain
Yeah.
ideas that you share multiple times. I think that's actually how people find you,
Yeah.
right? When I'm going through your content, Selena, I can see some common threads
Hmm.
that run through a lot of your posts, but that doesn't make me bored. It makes
Hmm.
me more interested because I can dig deeper into, practical magic for business, which we will talk about. Don't
Yeah.
worry. And it's like, okay, great. This is a series. This is, places that I can continue learning.
Hmm.
It's not boring, but I do think that sometimes creatives worry that if they talk about the same kind of thing more than once,
Yeah.
it's not going to be interesting for them or for their audience. And I don't think that that is actually the case.
Yeah. Oh, and also like information overwhelm. Sometimes less really is more, and being able to master certain concepts. Like I talk about, yes, very similar things very frequently because I have many different ways that I can talk about the same thing, and it's going to affect people differently, and you're going to resonate with one verbiage over the other. And
Yeah.
I just because you wrote a post one time doesn't mean that everybody saw it. In fact, with
Right.
the algorithm, maybe like 1% saw it anyways. So I think that creating a brand is also about identifying like where you stand and where your values are, and the core parts of what you do. And so of course it's going to be repetitive, but allowing yourself the permission to, yes, like have these very specific channels. I also have an email that I do every week. It's the same structure. It's my energy forecast. I do energy readings. And
Cool.
it's like I've never stuck to an email more than I ever have in my entire life. Like this is the only time I've ever been consistent, and it's like easy, no brainer. I don't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I love that idea. I think if people are listening and they are maybe in that boat where they resist the container or the structure, I think it would be worth trying because it's always shocking how much more prolific you
Hmm.
can be if you know the structure, because otherwise you're making all these decisions. Which platform should this go on? How long should it be?
Yeah.
I want to write an email. Is it a short one? Is it a long one? Blah blah blah. If you have the container already set out for you,
Mhm.
you are just so much more able to fill it. And then you're prolific, which I would say you are prolific on Instagram.
Yeah. Thanks.
And so it's like, and that's a good thing because people find you, people
Mhm.
connect with you, they learn from you,
Mhm.
which is ultimately like a huge piece of the puzzle when it comes to business. So I love that idea of kind of introducing more structure
Mhm.
in ways that work for you.
Yeah.
But let's go to the practical magic because I have to talk about it. I love that movie, and I
Yes.
love that you use the theme,
Yeah.
the song. That's actually, I think that was one of the first posts that our mutual friend Sonia shared with me
Mm.
of your work was practical magic for business. So can you talk about practical magic for business? What is it to you? How do
Mm.
you use it in your own business? Any way that you want to share, because it's such a cool concept.
Thank you. Yeah, I love a theme. I love a pun.
Hmm.
So that's always important to me right off the bat. But truly, I like to infuse practical magic because when we talk about energetics as we're applying business, I feel like it can sound so vague and so like, okay, cool, like I'll manifest and I'll journal and stuff. Now what?
Hmm.
And we miss the point where we intersect spirituality with our human experience and like where that exists in our little pockets of everyday life. And if, especially if you're someone who believes that your work is a part of your purpose and you connect to it on a bigger scale, it means that whatever you're doing is also co-created then with the universe, which means on some level energetics plays a really important role in how you work. And so practical magic is using like your everyday experiences, things you're already gonna do, and puts more infusion of intentionality and energy inside of it. So for
Mm.
example, it can look like I'll talk about things like infusing intentions into your coffee in the morning, because coffee, by the way, is a
Mm.
very helpful tool in manifestation, and like drawing in certain energies to your day. I talk about infusing energy before you hit post,
Hmm.
or like using. I just recorded one about asking your spirit guides what needs to be communicated through you and letting that be a part of the
Mm.
writing process. It's about looking at business as something bigger than yourself and also not seeing yourself as the only thing that exists within it, and how do you connect to
Mm.
it. And
Mm.
I've seen some pretty cool things happen. I talk about like asking for signs. You
Hmm.
can do that with your business all the time. But I talk about things that you can apply that are like you physically can do. I use movements, specific rituals that like are very practical. Your clothes, there's glamour magic. There's so many things you can do that don't require you to be like in a forest in with like a fire pit with like a circle of people you don't know. Like that's not what this is, and it needs to be more human, you know?
Yeah, it needs to fit more into your everyday life. I mean, if you want to go to the forest, we're not
Yeah,
going to stop you.
absolutely
Go,
not.
go now.
Yeah.
But I love this idea because, well, a couple things. First, I think it's so nice to think about the fact that you might not be alone in this business, because I think so many people do feel all alone. But there was a reason that you, Celina, were pulled towards the business you have now.
Mm-hmm.
Every single person listening, there was a reason you were pulled towards the business that you have now. And so remembering that and remembering that you are being guided on some level, whatever your spiritual practice might be, I think is a very nourishing
Mm-hmm.
thought, and it's very reassuring, right? I don't have to do this all alone. I'm not all alone.
Mm-hmm.
It really reminds me of that concept from Big Magic where Anne Patchett steals Elizabeth Gilbert's book idea,
Mm-hmm.
and I think about that a lot, right? Ideas find the person who will be a good conduit
Yeah.
for that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not a good conduit, if you don't open that flow or don't listen to the messages that are being sent to you,
Mm-hmm.
your ideas will flitter off somewhere else. They will
Yeah.
be like, you're not a good host for this.
Yeah.
So that's just really cool to think about, and something I think for sure I could do more of, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about when you're posting or you're launching or you're, just showing up
Mm-hmm.
in your business, what are the things that can help you feel connected to messages or the manifestations that you're making?
Yeah.
Um, it's just so cool. It's so
Yeah.
neat.
And there's like so much you can do with it. Like with every literal strategic situation you're working through, there is an energetic counterpart that mirrors that. And so when we
Mm.
when we talk about like whenever I talk about launching, it goes hand in hand with talking about vulnerability and like with the energy behind that. There's also a lot of nervous system support in the work that I do, because a lot of it is bringing your body on board for what this expansion is going to be. And so when we look at businesses like, you got more clients and that's what you asked for, so that should be enough, like that's not going to sustain you. We have like 18 layers of experience behind that. It's not just as simple as like show up. Okay, cool.
Mm.
My experience of trauma doesn't let me just pop online. What do I do
Yeah.
now? And so this is about like understanding your personal energetics and what you need to move through certain things. I use movement as an anchor for a lot of people.
Mhm.
There's a lot of practices like they include shaking that support your nervous system, things that will
Mm.
pull you out of a state of fight or flight and into an energy that allows you to be open and receptive to what you're doing. So it's really like, how do we look at business as one extension of ourselves? And if we can look at it as an extension of our being, can we treat it as such, as not just like this thing with numbers and marketing, but also something that also has its own life force?
Mhm. It's this feeling of embodiment that has to happen,
Hmm.
it sounds like. So we have all of these ideas for strategies, things that are told to us with zero context. I've talked about this on the podcast many times of just quadruple your prices
Yeah.
and show up every single day and, blah, 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 always be closing, et cetera, et cetera. And I love this idea. I never thought about it quite that way of what you're sharing of like for every single strategic thing, there is an energetic
Hmm.
thing. And I do think that even just that concept alone could be so powerful for people. Like, okay, I'm asking myself to do this strategic thing that I was told to do, or
Hmm.
somebody told me to do something strategic, like show up online every day for 30 days or whatever.
Hmm.
And then thinking about in your own body or in your own self, what is the energetic thing that needs to be addressed in order for that to be accessible or
Hmm.
interesting or possible for me? And working on both of those levels at the same time is just a very profound idea. It
Yeah.
feels very honest
Hmm.
that of course we're human, these pieces of advice completely out of context
Hmm.
that should just work for everyone are bogus. They
Yeah.
only work for certain people
Hmm.
in certain seasons
Yeah.
of life. And so always meeting your strategy with your energy is just, a really cool concept. I love that. Oh,
Thank
so
you.
good.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
welcome.
but truly, like, even like when I talk about, I mean, I know it's so delightful that I'll bring back this concept of shit the bedposts. I know you really wanted me to talk about that again.
I did, yeah.
But when we talk about that and we talk about it through the lens of like what it means for you to be more visible, if you're
Hmm.
just going to do it to do it and you're not paying attention to, oh my God, how did that feel in my body? Or did that feel really vulnerable? Or how do I come back to myself? Like, can I put the phone down and like put it in another room if I need to so I can sit with myself when I'm feeling like really heightened right now because I can't control how that went? Like,
Mm,
noticing what's happening in your body as you are doing things is the best way that you're actually going to get the healing benefits. And one of the most challenging parts of being in business is, you're taking in so much information all the time. It's really hard not to feel like you know already. We
mm,
go to this knowing and we stay there and we assume on some level it's the same thing as embodying. And so there's this energy of like, oh well, I know that I should have better boundaries. Okay, cool.
mm,
Why is that not reflecting in your everyday life? Oh, you should be on social media less? Why are you not? Oh, you should be posting more. Like, I know you know. I know you know, so does it not feel available in your body? Like, what's
mm-hmm,
behind that? And so
mm-hmm.
it's kind of a double-edged sword that way, where like we know so much information that sometimes it hinders us from actually stepping into the work and acknowledging
Yeah.
our own shadows or the things that don't feel consistent, without the personal development world telling you it's your fault because you have a bad money mindset and you didn't try hard enough. Like, shut up. Like, that's not like, let's
Shut
go.
up.
Yeah, like, let's go right over the point, I guess, and somehow make this my fault
Right.
again. Thanks. I didn't have enough on my list of self-blame, you know?
Yes, yes. That is, I mean, a very core concept of the MLM of it all
Mhm.
is just blame it on them if it doesn't work
Right.
and sell more. Yeah, I think this is really, really an interesting place to explore, a place to play, because it is something that I think gets left out of the conversation a lot. And it also reminds me of another theme that I think you bring up really well in your work, which is kind of about the work and the play outside of your business,
Mm.
like the exploration of adding more to your life
Mhm.
and adding more to the person that you are when you're not a business owner, which I also think is something that is extremely important. And we've seen so many business owners burn out. We've seen so many businesses close. It's not a it's not a coincidence, you know, we're all working so hard and we're doing everything in this way that we have been taught to do it, in this sense of strategy without energy is kind of like the theme that I'm bringing from
Mhm.
this conversation. We're just doing all this strategy. We're not looking at our energy. And a lot of us are burning out because of it. So I would love for you to like speak more to that concept. I know you had a recent post about like adding more life
Mhm.
into your work,
Yeah.
which is just such a cool concept. So yeah, how does that play into the work that you do with clients?
Yeah, well, the way that I see is like we know that life is what inspires art and your work is art.
Mm,
And so if there's a
mm,
lack of life happening and the only thing that you can focus on is your work, we've just tapped out the source of your work. So then we're asking the work to
mm,
kind of fuel itself, and then where are we actually replenishing from? And it it's hard because then we get into like the self-care space. My goal is to help people build businesses that they don't need to take breaks from, that they don't need to walk away from in order to feel like themselves again. And so it's not about this idea of like, well, I'm just going to put my head down and work until I get to this place one day in my business where I then can like live my life and feel joy. It never comes.
mm,
And I've worked with
mhm.
entrepreneurs who've been in business for like decades and still haven't gotten there because you're never going to get there. You'll constantly shift the milestone. It'll constantly be further
Yep.
away. And so if you're not enjoying your life now, it's never going to just like appear one day. You can't, take something that's not working for you and imagine that one day it'll become abundant. And so having something else that fuels your creativity. Oh my gosh, please have something else that fuels your creativity. It's not always going to be like we talk about repetition. You're going to say the same things every day. You're going to tell your clients the same things, and then what?
Yeah.
And that's gonna fuel you for the rest of your life. No, we need to step outside, get a hobby, do something that actually excites you again, and try something new, which also will build up your self trust and being seen. It does all the same things on a more effective scale because it's not attached to your worth. And it allows you
Mhm.
to have more to bring to your work. There's more
Mhm.
experience, there's more fuel to it. And you deserve to have an experience of work that you actually enjoy. And the irony is that
Mhm.
every time I work with someone on these things, because I'll sometimes get the feedback of like, yeah, but like I need to make sales. I'm like, okay, cool, but what you're doing isn't working. So let's just try it my way for like a minute and see if that works.
Mhm.
And so we'll take
Mhm.
this approach of kind of reevaluating their structure, their life, their routines, going on solo dates, which I'm a big advocate of, like having more life in their life. And then all of a sudden, like they look more like themselves in their video. You can tell they're enjoying
Mhm.
themselves. You can, see life behind their eyes. They're actually excited to be
Mhm.
there. You can tell they're not just like checking a box to create something. And
Yeah.
what do you know, it creates more abundance because people buy from people. They're more interested in who you are. People like to
Yeah.
say the market is saturated, which is like of course an annoying conversation. But on the flip side of that conversation is that as consumers, we have more choice than ever. There are an
Mhm.
abundance of options for people. So they're interested in, do you feel like the right channel for me to explore this kind
Right.
of work? And so I want to
Right.
know who you are and feel connected to who you are. And so I
Yeah.
want to work with someone where I can feel like they're a person. So go
Mhm.
be a
Mhm.
person so you can go be an
Yeah.
entrepreneur?
Absolutely. It also strikes me that it makes you so much more resilient. Like we've
Mm,
been talking about this idea of how do we support ourselves in showing up and
mm,
launching and doing all the things in business that can be so scary and so overwhelming and so draining if
mm,
we're doing them in the old school way.
mm,
And it's sort of like when you when you have a great group of friends and then you're going on like blind dates. I remember this phase of my life when I'd go on blind dates, but I would feel so like fine with it because I'd be like even if it's awful, I have the group chat. I can just
yeah.
come home and be like, friends, let's discuss. And you just don't feel like it's that big of a deal. Whereas if you didn't have a really strong group of friends and you didn't have a partner and you didn't have
Yeah.
close family relationships, it's like there's so much more
Mhm.
that this means, this one date. And so in terms of business, it's like if this launch doesn't go that well,
Mhm.
so what? You can still text the group chat. So what? You
Yeah.
can still go to pottery class. So what? You can still go for a run with your dog.
Yeah.
So it's building up resilience and strength
Mhm.
in yourself and who you are, which I think makes it easier to weather the storms
Mhm.
of business, of which there will be many. Things
Sure.
don't go to plan. So if you can build up those strengths, and I think the problem is we think we have to build up those strengths only through business lessons, and I
Mhm.
don't think that that's the case.
No, I mean, absolutely. By the way, I have been on, my friend was on a blind date and we were in the booth behind her. And so
Ah!
we'd go to the washroom to meet up to discuss what was happening. I highly recommend if you need an interesting evening.
That is everything. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I wish my friends and I were all dating again so that I could do that.
But it's a really good time. The waitresses are usually pretty on board. Um,
Yeah.
but yes, absolutely. With that, it's, also when we look at the way in which the online space is looking, when we talk about marketing, when we talk about industry shifts, things are always going to be changing. I
Yeah.
hear a lot of people who get really frustrated when social media changes. Like, that's inevitable, like it's going to be. But
Mhm.
it gets a lot harder to weather those changes when all of your worth is like trying to figure it out and trying to hack the system. You don't have to hack the system. When you let yourself explore other options, you're actually more likely to be objective, to be creative, to consider other opportunities and options outside of your main platform, whatever it is. When you have other things that are replenishing your energy, when you're just staring
Yeah.
at this one screen all day, every day, and then switching from the big screen to the medium screen to the little screen, and you just like re-rotate, like you're not giving yourself enough breathing room to get creative. That's not just like
Mhm.
creative for the sake of content, but creative for the sake of like, how am I going to do things differently? How am I going to approach this in a
Yeah.
new light? How can I offer myself
Yeah.
a better opportunity to do this work,
Right. Yeah. It makes the stakes feel less high
Mhm.
because you have other things to explore. So, how this one post doesn't feel like the end of the world
Mhm.
to you. And it also reminds me, I remember having an interview with Sarah Von Bargen years ago, and she talked about how she reads a lot of like magazines and books outside of her industry. She was also in online business.
Mhm.
And so she would read like carpentry magazines and
Yeah.
things like that because it would always give her new ideas, new metaphors, new language,
Mhm.
and it just gave her a different kind of inspiration that's not
Mhm.
just like, let's move in these circles, let's learn from these people. We're all talking about the same thing.
Mhm.
Instead, we're going to go and find inspiration in other places. And I think that that's just absolutely the
Yeah.
case, right? We have to find inspiration outside of what we do all day, every day,
Yeah.
not just to fuel our businesses.
Mhm.
It's not for that,
Yes.
but that is also, if you're looking for that spark,
Yeah.
you've lost that spark, you're not going to find that spark in the thing in the way that you've been doing it.
Mhm.
Sonia often says the solution is not found on the level of the problem.
Mm.
And so if you're still on the level of the problem, you're not going to be finding that solution for yourself or your business.
Yeah.
It's very, very wise. Yeah.
Yes. It's the same way that like when people tell me that they follow people in their industry for inspiration. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's not inspiring. It's not.
No.
You all you're gonna do is gonna be like, guess what? Now I have nothing to say because I feel like they said everything that I want to say. Cool.
Yes.
That's not helpful. So
No.
especially if you're about to create content, oh, for the love of all that is good in the world, do not look at other people's content before creating your own content for ideas. It's the fastest way to feel like you have nothing important to say in the world. You know,
Yeah.
be
And to
more in
feel
your.
behind.
Mhm. Yeah.
You feel behind. You're like, I need a podcast. I need a, social media coordinator. I
Mhm.
need whoever, whatever thing that this other person has.
Yeah.
I'm not posting enough. I'm not doing enough. Whereas the people that I follow that I find the freshest are the ones that I think take in the least amount from
Mhm.
other people because they're coming up with new ideas that are totally original. They're
Mhm.
like totally interesting and original. And then you think that if you just copy the other people, you're going to have the same results, but you're not. You
Yeah.
need to be, it's almost like it's reminding me of, I love water. It's reminding me of this idea of like you have like a closed pond
Mhm.
versus if you have it being fed by a stream. And
Yeah.
we got to find those streams because otherwise we're just standing water. It's just a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Ain't nobody got time for that. Like,
Absolutely
no,
not.
thank you.
Well, yeah, and because even when we're looking at other people being like, oh my God, I love the way they do it, it's because you're seeing what they look like when they're standing in their authentic voice and
Mhm.
their true power. And mimicking
Mhm.
that is never going to get that same authenticity. It's about seeking your own authentic voice and what that looks like for you and having your own space. The one thing I constantly recommend to entrepreneurs is more silence. We consume way too much
Mm.
information. I stopped reading personal development books and podcasts. Like a lot of them I had to like slow down because it was like it was everything I was listening to constantly all of the time, and it was always about like if
Yeah.
I could be better. I'm like, okay, I can be better. And it was like at the same time I was never actually hearing what I had to say or what was going on in my own mind. I was never having the time or the energy to process it because it was like I was always consuming something, and then of course social media, the obvious over consumer.
Yeah.
But you need
Yeah.
more silence. You'll find your biggest aha moments in your clarity. It's how I connect to spirit. I recommend people. Oh, do you want to hear my favorite? I recommend this to everyone. I have to say, I tell so many people that it's going to ruin
Sure
it for
do.
me. People are going to know my secrets in person. Um,
Ah.
but what I do, I go on walks every day, and that's where I talk
Mhm.
to my spirit guides, and I sit inside. I stand in silence, basically. But what I do is I put my headphones in, and I'll go for a walk, and I'll just talk like I'm talking right now, and I'll ask them, I'm like, "What do you want me to do with this? Like, how should I do?"
Mm.
So people on the street think you're on the phone, so you
Yep.
don't look like you're, not, not losing it, and like you get the joy of like fully expressing yourself while being in movement with,
Yeah.
which also helps with that flow and having that
Yeah.
honest open conversation, and then I'm just listening back to silence, to hearing that guidance, and people just think you're on the phone. It is my favorite thing. I recommend doing it. I do it every single day, but now enough people are going to be like, that woman, I know that woman, and that woman's talking to no one. So
I happen to be a very fierce proponent of talking to yourself.
mhm.
Like when my partner is not home, I just walk around the whole house just talking to myself
Yeah,
constantly. Maybe I should admit that, but I actually think it helps me think and
yeah.
helps me express things better. So I love this idea. We'll be stealing it.
Mhm.
I also like just like going for walks in places where not that many people are, and then I just like talk out loud anyway.
Yeah.
But yes, that's great. Or voice memos, like writing,
Oh
sending
yeah.
a voice memo to yourself is such a good one.
Hmm.
That's such a good practice.
Yeah.
Oh, Celina, you're so full of great ideas. Okay,
Thank you.
I'm gonna move to our relaxed responses, but I feel like I could talk to you for 12 more years.
Yeah, same.
You just have such great concepts that I think we could all apply to our businesses. But yes, this fun part. Oh,
Mm.
and I forgot to show you also for those who are watching. I wore my like best witchy sleeves for you. You
Oh,
can't really tell, but they have
yes,
like a witchy cuff, which I
I'm
thought
into
you would
that.
appreciate.
Oh, I do appreciate that. Thank you for doing that for me.
You're welcome. Okay, so relaxed responses, not rapid fire, because this is the Slowpreneur podcast. So we're
Cute.
just gonna get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is, how do you take your tea or your coffee, whichever
With
you consume?
well, I consume both, but my coffee is my best friend, and I drink espresso. But I didn't
Oh,
realize, and I'm Italian. I grew up drinking like cups of espresso. It's very bad. I don't recommend it, but that is just what I've learned. And then I use almond milk creamer.
oh, okay, great, love it. I actually really love that question. I think it is so interesting how different people do it.
Yeah.
What is the best book you have read lately?
Oof. I haven't actually really been reading lately. However, I did pick up this book, which is The Pivot Year, and it's like
Ooh, I've
daily
heard of this.
insights. Yeah, so it's like very digestible daily insights, and it says 365 days to become the person you truly want to be, and it's just like delightful little nuggets that I find that are helpful actually.
Cool. So you're enjoying it so
Hmm.
far. Are you reading it like on the day of the day
Yeah, so
it
it'll say
is?
like day 10, and then it has a passage, and so you just do a passage
Oh,
a day.
okay.
Yeah.
It's not the date. It's not like
No.
May, whatever. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So you could pick it up at any time.
Yeah.
Love that. Where is your favorite place on earth?
Ooh. Ooh. Any good forest. I'm a big forest
Mm,
girl. Like if I'm amongst trees, everything feels better in my life. So there is
hmm
like specific trails I really love. I mean, if you're like local, well, it's not really local, but there's a trail in Kleinberg that like always
mm,
makes me feel so good, and it's got enough
mm,
space in it, and being close to the city. There's not many spaces that let you do that, but there's a lot of space. And so that's my current favorite forest, if you will.
Everyone should have a favorite forest,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Okay, and then the last question is, what is something you recently bought yourself as a gift?
Ooh, that's a good one. Something I recently bought myself as a gift. Well, I do love to thrift, so I have like a plethora
Ooh, me too.
of shirts that I thrift. I've learned the concept of an outfit recipe and learned that I wear big shirts over everything. So there's that.
Mm,
And actually
mm-hmm.
I have this cutie here, which is it's a bracelet, but
Ooh,
the hardware is vintage, and then they like take vintage jewelry and they put crystals on it.
cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks.
That's so beautiful. I love it. Okay, and last but not least, where can people find out about you? How can they follow you? How can they work with you? We all want to know more about Celina Rosso,
Oh my god.
Intuitive Business
Oh my god,
Witch.
thank you so much. You can follow me on Instagram at Celina Rosso. I'm also on TikTok in the same way, but it's easier to reach me on Instagram. And there you can see my site. Oh, yes, celinarosso.com. But you can see my site. My offerings are all there. And you can always shoot me a DM if you have any questions.
Cool. Well, Celina, this has been such a joy. I am so happy that we could connect and talk about, some of our favorite topics,
Yes.
and I feel like we have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
So it was such a treat.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
being here.
Oh,
Yay. Thanks so much for listening to Slowpreneur. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend or reach out and let me know at hello@stephaniepellet.com. I would love to hear from you. As always, you can find show notes for this and all episodes at stephaniepellet.com/slowpreneur. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.